Thanks so much for checking out my show. I really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. I really appreciate all of the support. I am continuing to follow this Bahamas mystery. Lynette Hooker still hasn't been found. Her husband, Brian Hooker, says they fell off their dinghy in stormy conditions. He was in custody for 72 hours. He has now been released and he's now speaking out, which I'm going to get into in this episode. Everything that he is now saying, that he is out and free. Also something really interesting, which you're going to hear in this episode. I'm talking to a captain, a boat captain, who's in the Bahamas right now, who says that the weather actually was not as bad as what Brian Hooker has described the conditions were like when Lynette went missing. So you'll hear from him. I'm going to have an update on everything that's happened over the last 24 hours in the case.
No scream, no struggle witnessed, no goodbye, just the sound of an engine cutting out somewhere in the dark water between two islands and a husband who arrived back at the dock alone. What you are about to hear is not a story about a storm. It is not a story about an accident. It is the story of a woman who, 2 years before she vanished, looked her closest friend in the eye and said something so specific, so chilling, that when investigators finally heard it, everything changed. We cannot tell you what she said just yet, but we will. And when we do, we need you to remember one thing: nobody listened. Tonight, we are standing inside a case that has maritime data, a missing safety device, a watch that ended up somewhere it should never have been, and a man whose story has a very serious problem with the laws of physics. The kind of problem that cannot be explained away. The kind that a seasoned defense attorney, a man whose entire career is built on finding reasonable doubt, looked at and publicly admitted made him scared. We want to be transparent with you before we go any further. This case contains deeply disturbing details, allegations of domestic violence, a disappearance under circumstances that have shaken investigators, and evidence that will make you question everything you think you know about how well we truly know the people closest to us. If that is something you are not in a position to hear right now, we understand. But if you are ready, stay with us. Because this woman deserves every single set of eyes on her story. If you are new to True Crime Files, welcome. This channel exists for exactly this, for the cases that are still moving, for the families still waiting, for the investigations that have not been fully told yet. Hit subscribe right now and turn on your notifications, because this case is developing fast and we will be here every single time it does. And before we go any further, drop a comment below and tell us where in the world you are watching from. We have viewers from everywhere and we want to know you are here. Now let us go back to the water, because that is where this story begins, and that is where far too many questions have been left to float, unanswered, in the dark. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old. She was from Entin, a small town in Lenawee County, Michigan. She did not grow up afraid of water. Her mother, Darlene Hamlet, confirmed that lakes, boats, and open water were woven into Lynette's childhood. She was a regular swimmer. The ocean was familiar ground. In 2020, Lynette and Brian Hooker made a decision most people only ever talk about. They had been married for roughly 25 years at that point. They sold their home in Kentwood, Michigan, walked away from their careers, and drove to Rockport, Texas. There they found a 40-foot sailboat and named it the Soulmate. The next 3 years were spent on repairs and preparation. In March 2023, they finally left Port Aransas, Texas, and did not look back. They called themselves the Sailing Hookers. Their life at sea went up on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok starting in April 2023. The content was unfiltered: solar oven meals cooked on deck, scuba dives in open water, storm footage shot from the cockpit, mornings on calm seas, manatees, sea turtles. Thousands of people followed along. Lynette posted her last TikTok 2 days before she vanished. By early 2026, the couple had spent roughly a month navigating the Abaco Islands in the Bahamas aboard the Soulmate. To everyone watching online, they were living the dream. What was happening off camera was a different story entirely. The Hooker marriage, by every documented account, had genuine highs and serious lows. Lynette's mother, Darlene Hamlet, told journalist Ashley Banfield directly that both existed, and that when the difficult periods came, they were not minor. Carly Aylesworth, Lynette's daughter and Brian's stepdaughter, described the relationship across CNN, NBC, Fox News, The Today Show, and ABC as volatile and rocky, particularly in situations involving alcohol. She gave that account on every platform she appeared on and never walked any part of it back. The clearest window into the state of the marriage came from private messages Lynette sent to her close friend and fellow sailor Mon Stevenson in early 2024. CBS News obtained those messages. In them, Lynette described surrendering everything for life at sea with Brian, her career, her home, her possessions, only to leave him just 6 weeks into sailing together. She went to stay with her mother in Florida. When Mon asked whether there was any path back, Lynette was direct. The marriage was finished. She could not be out there with him anymore. 1 month later, she returned to the soulmate. By late February 2024, her messages to Mon showed the couple had reconciled. What shifted during that month is not part of any public record. What is documented is that she went back. 14 months after that, she was gone. There is also a formal 2015 police report from Kentwood, Michigan. Officers responded to a domestic incident between the couple that year. Both Brian and Lynette gave conflicting accounts to police. A prosecutor reviewed the case, found insufficient evidence to determine who initiated the incident, and dismissed it without charges. That report exists on the formal record. Separately, Carly Aylesworth stated publicly that her mother told her in January 2026 that Brian had threatened to throw her off the boat during a 2024 argument. CNN could not independently confirm that specific allegation with law enforcement. Brian Hooker's Bahamas-based attorney Terrell Butler stated he categorically and unequivocally denies any wrongdoing. His Michigan-based attorney Crystal Marie Horser told ABC News there is no evidence supporting any allegation made by Carly or Darlene Hamlet. On the evening of April 4, 2026, Brian and Lynette Hooker were seen together at the Abaco Inn on Elbow Key, near Hope Town in the Abaco Islands. The last known photograph of Lynette was taken there, at the pool, that evening. She was wearing a green cover-up. That specific detail would later catch the attention of investigators. Ken, the bartender at the Abaco Inn, was among the last people to see them together. He confirmed the couple left between 7:00 and 7:30 that evening. Their destination was the Soulmate anchored offshore. Fox News Digital later worked with Mo Monstein, a local boat captain with 15 years of chartering experience in the Great Abaco area, to physically recreate that route. He guided the recreation himself. The route runs southwest out of the harbor, between the western coastline of Elbow Key and the eastern coastline of Lubbers Quarters, directly to the anchorage point. It took approximately 4 minutes. Brian Hooker made his most detailed account of what happened next during a phone call to Blaine Stevenson on April 7th. Stevenson recorded the call without Brian's knowledge and later shared it with CNN. According to that account, the couple left Hope Town in their 8-foot hard-bottom motorized dinghy after sundown. Winds picked up quickly, reaching around 20 to 25 knots. Lynette went over the side of the dinghy in the choppy conditions. Neither of them was wearing a life jacket. Brian said the engine's safety lanyard went overboard with her because it was not clipped to anything, cutting engine power entirely. He said she also had a spare key in a dry bag she was carrying. He attempted to paddle, lost an oar, dropped anchor, and called out to her. The moon had not yet risen. He said he last saw her swimming toward shore before the wind separated them. He then drifted across the Sea of Abaco for 7 hours before beaching near Marsh Harbor. Edward Smith, a security guard on duty at the Marsh Harbor boatyard that night, found Brian when he came ashore. Brian was exhausted, asked for water, and told Smith that Lynette was still in the water. Smith called police. Officers arrived around 5:00 a.m. Brian had reported Lynette missing approximately 1 hour earlier, at around 4:00 a.m. He later left a voicemail for Carly Aylesworth, saying Hope Town Search and Rescue had recovered a flotation device he threw toward Lynette when she went overboard, and that searchers could now concentrate their efforts in a tighter area. Richard Cook, fire team lead with Hope Town Volunteer Fire and Rescue, confirmed separately to CNN that Lynette was not wearing a personal flotation device when she went into the water. That is Brian Hooker's account, complete and as documented across every source that recorded it. It has not changed. What the investigation found when it examined that account is a different matter entirely. Brian Hooker's account has remained consistent since the night Lynette disappeared. But consistency is not the same as accuracy. When investigators and independent witnesses began examining the specific details of that account, 6 questions emerged that the public record has not answered. The first centers on the engine key. The entire explanation for why Brian had no engine power and why he drifted for 7 hours instead of motoring back to search rests on one claim, that Lynette was holding the dinghy's safety lanyard when she went overboard. That lanyard is the ignition cord. It is worn by the person operating the vessel. When it detaches from the operator, the engine cuts out immediately. That is its function. Brian's childhood friend Harley told Fox News Digital plainly that Lynette never drove the dinghy. Brian always drove. Carly Aylesworth told CBS News the same thing. She said she had never once seen her mother operate that boat. If Lynette was a passenger on a crossing she never drove, there is no standard explanation for why she would have been wearing the operator's safety lanyard. That question has not been answered publicly. The second question is the timeline. Ken, the bartender at the Abaco Inn, noted it first. The couple left between 7:00 and 7:30 that evening. The crossing to the Soulmate, as physically recreated by boat captain Mo Monstheim, takes 4 minutes. Brian did not arrive at the Marsh Harbor boatyard until around 4:00 a.m. That is a gap of 8 to 9 hours. Brian's explanation is a 7-hour drift across the Sea of Abaco. Forensic diver Alex Beer, a veteran police officer and dive rescue expert who spoke on the Criminally Obsessed podcast, explained that ocean drift in those conditions is determined by current direction, wind patterns, and tidal movement. Investigators have been actively analyzing whether a drift of that duration and distance is consistent with the conditions reported that night. The third question is direction. Brian says he last saw Lynette swimming toward shore. He then drifted toward Marsh Harbor, away from where he last saw her, away from the Soulmate, which he says was anchored roughly 1,000 yards from where she went in. A man with years of boating experience, on a route he had traveled hundreds of times, moved away from his missing wife and away from their vessel for the entirety of those 7 hours. The fourth question is the phone call. Brian contacted Carly Aylesworth on Sunday evening around 8:00 to 8:30 p.m. to tell her Lynette was missing. Carly described the call to CNN in precise terms. He delivered the information, mentioned the family would come to see her soon, and ended the call. She described his tone as matter of fact. The voicemail he later left regarding the flotation device was shared publicly. People who heard it independently used the same word to describe it: composed. No clinical evaluation of Brian's emotional state has been made public. Shock presents differently in different people, but multiple unconnected witnesses reached the same description without any coordination. The fifth question involves the Apple Watch. Darlene Hamlet confirmed publicly that Lynette's Apple Watch, the one she was wearing on the evening of April 4th, was found aboard the Soulmate. Lynette never made it back to the Soulmate. Her watch did. When it got there, and how it got there are questions investigators have not publicly addressed. It is part of the active evidentiary record. The sixth question is the green cover-up. The last known photograph of Lynette, taken at the Abaco Inn pool that evening, shows her wearing a green cover-up. Brian Hooker's account to authorities did not include that detail. What a missing person is wearing at the time they disappear is considered standard documentation in any missing persons investigation. The absence of that detail from his account has not been explained. 6 questions, not one of them has received a public answer, and none of them is the most significant piece of evidence in this case. The Soulmate was equipped with an AIS transponder. AIS stands for Automatic Identification System. It is a maritime navigation tool standardized globally by the International Maritime Organization. It was not designed as an investigative instrument. It was not installed on the Soulmate to generate evidence. It exists because vessels of that type operating in those waters are required to carry it. Its purpose is collision prevention in conditions where radar and visual identification fall short. What it does is straightforward. The transponder broadcasts the vessel's GPS position, speed, heading, and navigational status on a continuous automated loop. When the boat is moving, it transmits that data every 2 to 10 seconds. When anchored, it transmits at longer intervals. Every single transmission is time-stamped and received simultaneously by nearby vessels, shore-based receiving stations, and satellites in low Earth orbit. Multiple independent systems capture the identical signal at the identical moment. Those records are stored remotely. They cannot be altered after the fact. The Soulmates transponder was active and broadcasting throughout the entire night of April 4, 2026. The same window during which Brian Hooker says he was in a powerless dinghy, miles from the boat, paddling across the Sea of Abaco in the dark. Carly Aylesworth has stated publicly, across multiple platforms and on the record, that the AIS data shows movement of the Soulmate that does not align with Brian's account. That claim belongs to Carly. Law enforcement has not independently confirmed it in any public statement. What is confirmed is that the data exists, that it has been in investigative hands since the first day the U.S. Coast Guard opened its criminal inquiry, and that phones and laptops seized from the Soulmate are currently in forensic analysis. Randy Kessler reviewed the AIS evidence in this case. Kessler is a criminal defense attorney based in Atlanta, a professor at Emory Law School, and a former chair of the American Bar Association's Family Law Section. His entire professional career has been built on finding the argument that defeats evidence, locating the flaw in forensic methodology, the gap in the chain of custody, the inconsistency that introduces reasonable doubt. That is what defense attorneys do. Kessler looked at this data and said publicly on the record that it scares him. That statement means something specific coming from someone in that position. You cannot cross-examine a transponder. You cannot challenge the motive of a satellite. You cannot question the credibility of a timestamp logged simultaneously across multiple independent receiving systems. If the Soulmates AIS record shows that vessel moving during the hours Brian Hooker says he was nowhere near it, that is not a problem of conflicting testimony. That is a problem with the laws of physics. When Lynette was reported missing in the early hours of April 5th, the response was immediate. The Royal Bahamas Police Force launched operations. The Royal Bahamas Defense Force deployed sea patrols, shoreline patrols, aerial drone surveillance, and submersible drone operations. Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue, led by Fire Team Lead Richard Cook, was among the first units on the water. The U.S. Coast Guard conducted aerial searches and later deployed a team of cadaver dogs on April 16th. The search covered water, land, and sky simultaneously. 3 days in, on April 7th, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force made a formal operational shift, moving from an active rescue mission to a recovery operation. That distinction matters. It signals that authorities had assessed the probability of finding Lynette alive as having dropped significantly. Forensic diver Alex Beer, a veteran police officer and dive rescue expert who spoke on the Criminally Obsessed podcast, provided critical context for what that shift means in practice. Open water investigations in that region contend with shifting currents, unpredictable tidal patterns, and warm water conditions, all factors that complicate both the search itself and what recovery teams can realistically expect to find. A multi-week operation deploying every available asset can still come back empty. By the time the Royal Bahamas Defense Force indicated it was winding down organized search efforts, it had exhausted tide analysis, drift modeling, and wind pattern data. It had run out of viable locations. The only physical item recovered from the water was the flotation device Brian said he threw toward Lynette. Lynette herself has not been found. Brian Hooker was initially questioned by Bahamian police as a witness. His Bahamas-based attorney Terrell Butler confirmed he cooperated, answering questions for over 3 hours. When police asked him to return for further questioning, Brian declined unless his attorney was present. Police then took him into custody. On April 8th, 4 days after Lynette disappeared, Brian was formally arrested by the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Assistant Commissioner Edvardo Dames confirmed to Reuters the arrest, was based on probable cause. Brian was transporting to Nassau and then moved to the Grand Bahama Central Police Station in Freeport. Butler issued a public statement saying his client categorically and unequivocally denies any wrongdoing. During the custody period, police conducted a formal search of the soulmate. While that search was underway, Brian, who was handcuffed at the time, lost his balance on the boat and fell overboard. Butler described the water as choppy. Police pulled him out. He had taken in water and sustained a knee injury. His life vest kept him afloat. Brian was questioned multiple additional times during his detention. Butler told CNN that one Friday session focused primarily on the couple's personal life rather than physical evidence or electronic devices recovered from the boat. Authorities had until 7:20 p.m. on Monday, April 13th, to charge or release him. That deadline passed. Brian Hooker walked out of the Grand Bahama Central Police Station without charges. The Royal Bahamas Police Force confirmed the release was coordinated with the Department of Public Prosecutions, which recommended no charges be filed at that time, pending further investigation. RBPF Commissioner Chantal Niles confirmed to NBC News that Brian remains a named suspect. The word pending is not incidental. In prosecutorial language, it means the case remains open and the decision on charges has not been made, only deferred. Brian walked out of that police station without charges. Carly Aylesworth flew toward the Bahamas. Carly is 28 years old, based in Lowell, Massachusetts. She is Lynette's daughter and Brian's stepdaughter. From the moment Brian called her on Sunday evening with news delivered in a tone she described to CNN as matter of fact, she began asking questions publicly and has not stopped. She appeared on CNN, Fox News, The Today Show, Fox and Friends, NBC Dateline, ABC News, and CBS News. Her account across every platform has been identical. She told CNN she could not understand why Brian paddled away from where Lynette entered the water rather than staying in that area. She told CBS News she found it difficult to explain why Lynette would have been holding an engine key she never used. She told NBC Dateline she was concerned her stepfather would not be held accountable. She told ABC News that retracing her mother's last movements in person made the timeline feel more difficult to accept, not less. She went directly to the soulmate when she landed. She met with Bahamian police and sat with investigators for several hours. She walked the same route her mother walked on April 4th. She collected a headband, a necklace with an L charm Lynette always wore, a picture frame she had made for her mother, and something Lynette's own mother had sewn. She boarded her return flight to Lowell wearing that necklace. She posted a photo from that flight. She created a GoFundMe to fund the ongoing search. In an update after retracing the steps herself, she wrote that the closer she looked, the less the story held together. She told NBC Dateline she did not believe this was over. The U.S. Coast Guard interviewed her for 2 hours as part of its criminal investigation. In the hours after his release, Brian Hooker gave interviews to NBC, ABC, and CBS. He said he had not been apart from Lynette this long in 25 years. He said he was choosing to believe she was still alive. He told ABC his only focus was returning to the soulmate to organize a search, and that he had previously planned to hire a plane before his arrest. He told CBS he believed people had survived overboard in the Bahamas for days, even weeks. Within approximately 24 hours of those statements, he boarded a flight to Atlanta. His Michigan-based attorney, Crystal Marie Horser, confirmed he left to be at the bedside of his ailing mother and that he intended to return to the Bahamas. He had said he would stay until he found her. He left the next day. While Brian flew to Atlanta, Carly Aylesworth was already in the Bahamas. Friends of the couple who spoke publicly said he needed to step up. The forensic analysis of devices seized from the soulmate continued. The AIS data remained with investigators. The Apple Watch remained part of the evidentiary record. The U.S. Coast Guard criminal investigation did not pause. The Royal Bahamas Police Force investigation remained active. Brian Hooker remained a named suspect with no charges filed. As of this recording, Lynette Hooker has not been found. No charges have been filed. Brian Hooker remains a named suspect and continues to deny all wrongdoing. U.S. Coast Guard criminal investigation is active and running parallel to the Bahamian process under separate jurisdiction. The Royal Bahamas Police Force investigation has not closed. The Department of Public Prosecutions described Brian's release as pending further investigation, meaning the charging decision has been deferred, not abandoned. Phones and laptops seized from the soulmate remain in forensic analysis. The AIS transponder data has been with investigators since day one. The Apple Watch remains part of the evidentiary record. The U.S. State Department confirmed it is providing consular assistance alongside Bahamian authorities. The physical search conducted by the Royal Bahamas Defense Force has largely wound down after exhausting tide analysis, drift modeling, and wind pattern data. Cadaver dogs deployed by the U.S. Coast Guard on April 16th returned no result. She was 55. She left everything to sail with the man she had married. She told her closest friend she could not be out there with him anymore. She went back. 14 months later, she was gone. A 4-minute crossing took 9 hours. An engine key worn by someone who never drove. A watch on a boat its owner never reached. A man who said he would never stop looking on a plane that very morning. A defense attorney who dismantles cases looked at the data and said it scared him. That is not rhetoric. That is a professional with no argument left. Brian Hooker has not been charged. He denies everything. The law requires evidence. That work continues. Carly is not done. Darlene is not done. Lynette has not been found. The data does not forget. Neither do we.